My next guest says the gender wealth gap in Australia remains stubbornly wide. Now, while it's often blamed on major life events like raising a family or working in lower paid industries, new research shows it's the smaller everyday decisions that can cost women the most. Betsy Westcott, the Inner Money Journey and financial advisor, gives us some financial expert, I should say, gives us some insights here. Betsy, great to see you.
Good to see you.
So it's just the little things like picking up the kids or doing the washing, or what is all the things that are really leading to the wealth gap here?
Well, look, those major life events, they do count, but it's also these micro decisions that we make, and I think they're the ones that we can have a lot more control over. So it's the things like saying yes too quickly to a job without taking the time to really negotiate on that salary, or if you're running your own business, maybe you're undercharging, or it's deferring investments until you find a partner, or deferring the investments like that's something my partner takes over. All these little tiny decisions, not asking for a raise, they seem small, but they really set the baseline for how much you earn, how much you contribute to super, and they also then create limitations on how much you can invest and grow your wealth, which then restricts women's financial security and choices that they have in life. So for example, you might have applied for a role, the salary was advertised at 110,000, but you actually only get offered 102. And you think, oh, I should ask for more, I was expecting more, but it's only an 8,000 gap and it's a great opportunity, so I'll just take it. Doesn't seem like a big gap in earnings, but if you apply, modest wage growth, should I say, of 3.4% over a 30-year career, that gap in earnings amounts to over $450,000 of lost earnings. So it's quite big bickies. And it's not because women aren't capable. Often it's this social conditioning that we have around not being too much, not asking for too much, negotiating is greedy, and then also the unfair burden that women carry around that domestic labour, which is a real tax on their time and something that they carry even if they live in a dual income home. And that tax on their time means they have less time to work, less time to prioritise their financial well-being, and ultimately ends up with them being in a lesser financial position overall.
Why do you think, because it is true, I know myself, why do you think women are not as good at asking for pay increases or asking for what they're worth as men?
Well, think about the history that we've come through. A lot of times women, if they got pregnant, got married, they had to quit the jobs. Women didn't have the same opportunities. So there's this historical or intergenerational sense of, oh God, I'm so grateful to be here. That being said, there is a shift going on, and actually research from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency shows that women actually ask and initiate negotiations just as much as men, but they're less likely to have success. And this is those inherent biases that we have where assertiveness is perceived differently based on who's asking for the raise. So what can we do about this? At an individual level, it's all around that preparedness when you go to do the ask, to give yourself the best chance of being successful. So use data. I always say data trumps feelings. So, go out and find, what is my role worth in the market? Hayes has just released their salary guide. I'd be going and checking that, seeing what is the market rate for my role and seniority. So know that, then have really good data around how you have meaningfully contributed to the outcomes of your business and contributed to its performance, and really speak to those facts, and then practice. Practice makes perfect, and have a plan and almost expect to get a no, and have a planned response or a redirect for asking for something different in the event that happens. Now, if you're a business owner or someone running a team, things that you can do to make the workplace less biased, more fair, is have really good transparency around pay grades and salary bands. Teach your managers to expect a negotiation, make it a normal part of the course in your business, and how to handle that in a fair and objective way. And then really track the data on the gendered pay and progression outcomes, just to make sure, keep yourself accountable, that those biases aren't creeping in.
I remember a few years ago New York brought in rules where every job had to have its salary posted. Do you think we'd get to a level like that in Australia, and would that make things more fair?
Well, we do have that reporting now on jobs and pay grades and so forth. That's come in the last few years. I'm not the expert on it, but I know it's there, and there's some good literature around that. So we are starting to see that, and then the data on that is revealing some pretty scary things around the gender pay gap and, you know, what industries that the gaps are the highest. So I think, you know, like I said, data trumps feelings. Like when the facts are there and it's cold and hard, you really are forced to address it. So I'm hoping that's going to drive some really positive change in the future.
What about when it comes to promotions, taking on more? What holds women back?
Yeah, so often it's confidence and also it's not capability, that's for sure. So it's that confidence, that imposter syndrome, and often exhaustion levels, particularly in the caring years. So LinkedIn data shows that women are 20% less likely than men to apply for jobs, and when they look at the job ad, they're 16% more likely to apply for the jobs. Often it's because women hold themselves to a very high standard. They need to have 100% of the criteria before they apply for a job, versus men, broadly speaking, will feel confident in applying if they only meet 60 to 70% of the criteria. So that perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and like I said, that exhaustion in the caring years, feeling like, oh gosh, you know, I couldn't possibly take on this role and do a really good job. I've got all these pressures going on at home. You know, I'll be letting people down. Really prevent women from progressing. And turning down those promotions in, say, your 30s, it might have been a 15K pay bump, again, compounded over a 30-year career, that ends up being hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost earning. And it's not just the paycheck, it's also the trajectory that it puts your career on. Because when you say no to that opportunity, it often kind of sets the tone or sets the path for the opportunities that you get in the future. And this all compounds to impact, again, women's ability to create wealth and have that financial security.
When you talk about the caring years, there is good news that parental leave is going to be paid super now as well, so that will help a little bit. But what is the gender gap there when you take into account the caring years? Yeah,
so 94% of caring leave that is taken by women. And we know that, say, a woman in her 30s, if she has a couple of kids, she'll probably take about 5 years off cumulatively. And if she's earning the average wage and she's taken that 5 years and it's earning a very modest investment return in a super of 5.9%, she'll end up with about $351,000 less in retirement. Now, $351,000 in super, that's quite a few years of income and a lot of comfort in retirement that women are retiring without. And we see it in the data. 23.1% is the amount less that women retire with than men based on today's retirees. So I'm not saying that women shouldn't take time off to have children. What I'm saying though is that acknowledge that this does have a financial impact and kind of have a plan to mitigate it. So can you make voluntary contributions to super before you go on leave or when you come back? Whilst you're on leave, if you're partnered, can they make voluntary contributions to your super whilst you're taking that time out? Does your workplace pay leave on parental leave? We pay super on things like sick leave, carers leave, long service leave. Why we don't pay it on parental leave just baffles me. And a lot of organisations are moving that way, but it's not mandated, so many choose not to. And then the other thing I would encourage is that a lot more men take parental leave because, you know, yes, wealth and the paycheck's really important, but there are bigger things in life, and that opportunity that is now available to so many men to spend that time to bond with their children gives you a richness that money really can't buy.
And often then women potentially go into small business or freelancing as well. So what does that do and what sort of financial traps does that entail? Yeah,
I do a lot of business coaching in my line of work, and the two major things I see is undercharging and not contributing to retirement savings. So some research from the Freelancer Association came out recently, and it said 60% of women actually know that they're undercharging, and it's often, again, this social conditioning. I feel grateful, I don't want to ask too much, I don't want to scare the client off, I don't want to seem greedy. But say you're charging less than $20 less an hour than you know that you could, and you do that 20 hours a week over a 30-year career, that's $1 million in lost earnings. It's big bickies. So that's really impacting their wealth there. Then on the superannuation, a lot of people, particularly small business owners, both men and women, less than 50% of them are actually contributing to their super funds. So they might be building a business, but they're not building that personal wealth. So my tip there would be, as a business owner, price the super contributions into your product pricing or your service pricing as a fixed expense, just like you would tax or GST, anything like that. You will then have the funds available to contribute to super, and your future self will thank you for it.